My favorite part of Wichita is that we are a well-kept secret.
Welcome to another episode of the Wichita Live podcast. My name is Landon. Today's sponsor is Il Primo Espresso Cafe. Il Primo is the oldest coffee shop in Wichita. With two convenient locations at Central and Woodlawn and on the ground floor of the Epic Center, you're never too far from a great cup of coffee. Go get some Il Primo today. Today's guest is Molly Allen. Molly is a licensed psychologist and has been practicing for 30 years. We talk about her journey to becoming a psychologist and how she came to use the treatment known as neurofeedback. We discuss all the positive benefits that come from this incredible, non-invasive treatment that not very many people know about. You can find Molly at River Park Psych in Wichita. Enjoy my conversation with Molly Allen. All right, so I'm here with Molly Allen. How are you doing, Molly?
I'm fine. How are you, Landon?
I'm doing well. Can you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a licensed psychologist. I've been licensed to practice now for, I hate to admit it, but a little under 30 years. And I have a general practice here in Wichita. And I'm from this area, went to school in Colorado, then came back to practice.
Very cool. And where did you go to school in Colorado?
I went to, actually I got my undergraduate at Southwestern, and then I went to the University of Denver for my master's, and I got my doctorate from the University of Northern Colorado.
Okay, so that's a lot of school. Very cool. When did you move back to Kansas then?
1991.
Okay, and was that Wichita or just Kansas in general?
Wichita. I applied for internships all over the country and got accepted back home here, and that made my mother very, very happy. So
I imagine.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you practice is psychotherapy. Personally, I'm an engineer by trade, so I don't know a whole lot about that. Can you just talk a little bit about that and what interested you in that in the first place?
Sure. Psychotherapy is also known as counseling, and that's the interpersonal process of sitting across from somebody, or in case of, what we have to do now, telehealth, which is over the computer or over the phone. But talking about coping skills, and that's basically, what psychotherapy entails. So I work with a wide variety of patients, mostly on issues having to do with depression or anxiety when it comes to psychotherapy.
Okay. And how much of that is in person versus the telehealth deal?
Well, I just started with telehealth. Actually, I just had my first one just before talking to you today.
Okay.
We decided as an office to go to telehealth for the time being. And it's not my preferred way of meeting with people because I really like to get the interpersonal aspect, be able to read body language. And it also makes a difference, when people have to get up and put some effort into coming into the office.
Right. That makes sense. So one of the things that you reached out that you thought would be interesting for the Wichita audience and Wichita in general is one of the services that you now offer, which is the EEG-based biofeedback or neurofeedback. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right, yeah. I didn't know anything about neurofeedback until about 4 years ago. I went to a continuing education event to get my continuing education credits that we need to have every 2 years.
Uh-huh.
And the presenter spoke for the at that event on neurofeedback. And I've been doing this a long time, like I said, and not too many things really blow me away. And this blew me away. It's a technology-based approach to helping people improve how their brains function. And it is like the name implies, it's based on EEGs, so which most people understand a little bit about what that is. That's measuring how your brain waves are working.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to this event, learned about it, was intrigued. few weeks later, I had occasion to refer a patient to that psychologist. So I called her up and said, hey, want this person to come over to the office and try this. And by the way, I also want to try it myself.
Right.
The reason why I wanted to try it is because I have a neurological condition that, amongst other things, had resulted in me having insomnia.
Okay.
And I knew that I was eventually going to have to get off of the prescription medications that I really needed in order to get sleep. And so I signed up with her, had an assessment, started doing trainings with her. And after about 16 or 17 trainings, that night I went to sleep on my own without the use of prescription medication. And I haven't had any now in almost 3 years. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it worked really well for me. I continued working with her on some other issues that I wanted to improve. And then she contacted me. We took a little break after I'd had around 30 or so sessions. I wanted to take a little break for a while. And she contacted me a couple months later and explained to me that she was getting ready to move back home to Florida. So I hurried up and went in to finish up what I could before she left.
Yeah.
And that process, I said, I'm so impressed with how this works that I really would like to train to do this. And I was naive at first about what the training would entail. And it's a lot. It's a lot to learn the technology. It's a lot to learn all the process of using the equipment. But I decided that I was going to commit to doing that. I went off to do a course in Austin, Texas, and I earned 40 credit hours in 5 days.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, and came back, purchased my equipment, and got set up. And so I've been doing neurofeedback now for about a year and a half. And I have just a little under 400 sessions under my belt. And I'm working with a mentor on continuing to improve my skills. I'm studying for my board exams. And I really, really enjoy doing this work because I've seen it create some improvements for patients that are really impressive. And the way that this works is that we do an EEG, which you don't have to have a medical degree to do an EEG. Once you're trained how to do it, it's not an invasive test.
Okay.
And then we take the EEG information and run it through some filters in a computer program. And it compares the results from the EEG to a very large database of people who do not have any psychological symptoms. And compares this individual's, if I do an EEG on this individual, their EEG to those individuals, and shows us how far off they are from normal in a variety of areas. And so if you go to a neurologist and you get an EEG, they're mostly looking to see if you've got like a tumor or you have seizures.
Right.
And if you either, but they say, oh, you don't have tumors or seizures, you do have some, these results over here and these particular brain waves are not in the average range, but they look like they're just typical for you. So we can't really do anything for you. Well, we can do some things for people. Neurofeedback's been around for almost 50 years now.
Wow.
And the technology is steadily improving over time. We can do a whole lot more than they could do in the early days now. So what we do is take a look at how far off, your brainwaves are from normal. Where exactly are they off from normal? And set up a treatment plan for that individual. And sometimes I use the words treatment and training interchangeably, but it's closer to training actually, because I'm not adding anything to your head. I'm not adding anything to your brain. What I'm doing, in effect, is like a personal trainer would. I'm showing your brain what it's doing and asking it to do something different. And so it's like if you go to the gym and you're working out with a personal trainer and they point out when you're looking in the mirror, see where your shoulders are at. I need you to move them, or I need you to move them back.
Sure.
In neurofeedback, what we're doing is we're showing your brain, in effect, what it's doing and saying, okay, need to nudge you over here in this direction more. And the feedback part is actually kind of fun for the participants, for the patients. It's either videos of some sort, usually movies, or games, or music. And if I'm using videos of some sort, like a movie, then I explain to them, your goal is to be able to see the movie. And when your brainwaves are not where we've agreed we want them to be, then the screen's going to fill up with usually fuzz. You're not going to be able to see the movie. And your goal is to be able to see the movie. So their brain figures out how to get to that point where it can see the movie. And it's kind of fun on my end when I have somebody new in the chair working on neurofeedback to watch their brain figure it out, because I can see their brain figuring it out. The trick is that most brains are going to say, oh, okay, so I did that, so now I get to see the movie. Well, the trick is you got to keep doing that.
Sure.
So, and then the brain figures it out after, a few minutes. It's like, oh, you want me to still do that thing that I was doing where I can see the movie.
Interesting. Okay. How long is one of those sessions?
It's the whole thing is about an hour, just a little less than an hour. They're actually doing the training part of it for about half an hour, because I've got to have time to get them set up and then to take the equipment off of their head. And the equipment is really simple. It's just like some discs that we connect to the scalp with conductive paste. It's just this kind of, that looks like very, very thick hair gel, like, molding paste you use for your hair. It connects to their scalp. And so I want to put those electrodes in a very particular spots on the brain, or in the head. So I have a little cap that I put on their head that has holes in it for various spots where we can attach those electrodes, and I just mark up their head with what I like to use is an eyebrow pencil, because it usually works pretty well on most people's heads, and washes off pretty easily too. So I mark up their head, get the electrodes attached, and we do the training, and then afterwards, then I clean the paste off their head because it's kind of sticky and gooey. And also I have a couple of them on their ears too. And I explain to people, you don't have any brain waves coming out of your ears, I hope, but the purpose of a couple of electrodes on your ears is so that then I can measure whether or not we're getting a lot of muscle tension, or if there's some kind of electrical device nearby that's interfering with what my equipment's trying to read. So it takes about an hour each training. And I also explain to people in advance that it's not a one and done thing. It's not like, if you want to learn to play the piano, you don't go into a piano teacher's studio and take one lesson and then you're playing Beethoven, problem. It takes your brain a while to figure some of this process out. Like I said, it took me about 16, 17 sessions for my brain to figure out how to achieve that transition into sleep that I was not able to do before.
Sure. So, and how frequently are those sessions? So you said you went kind of 16 or 17 times at one point. Was that like once a week, twice a week? What does that look like?
I did once a week. My preferred when I'm working with patients is twice a week. Because we give the brain, some concentrated, pretty frequent kind of feedback about what it's doing, so that it can get to work faster. I have heard of substance abuse treatment programs that use neurofeedback that have their folks doing training every single day, which is okay. You can do that. But I do explain to people, if you do the trainings more frequently, you might be kind of tired because it's a lot of work for your brain to do.
Sure.
So,
yeah, it does make me think. I play a little bit of guitar now, but I played a little bit growing up. And I think when I had a teacher back in elementary school, and she would always say, like, yes, you could practice an hour once a week, but it might be better to do it 10 minutes or 15 minutes a day just to kind of keep that repetition. So that is interesting that both approaches work, but same idea.
Yeah, same idea. Yeah, and the goal with this is to teach your brain how to self-regulate better than it is doing now. And folks come in and they say, well, how is this different than me taking medication for ADHD or my mood problem? And what I explain to them is that the medication is going to work for you. It's going to change your brainwaves only for as long as it's on board, because it's kind of pushing your brainwaves to be a different way.
Right.
Your brain has not learned anything by taking the medication, how to do that on its own. So what we work on is your brain learning how to do it on its own. This is different than those brain training games that you might see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Those can be kind of helpful, but the difference is that your brain's learning a skill with those brain training games. This is not a skill that your brain's learning. Your brain is learning how to get its operating system in better balance,
Right.
so that it can function right.
Sure. How many sessions? I mean, I'm sure you can somewhat tell the difference after one, but again, like you said, it would take multiple sessions. But how many sessions does it usually take to start seeing, I don't know, noticeable progress?
It varies from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
If I do a particular kind of music-based training, most people say at the end of that one that they're super relaxed and feel more focused, and that can linger. Those effects can linger from that. And most people take at least 5 to 10 to start noticing effects.
Sure.
What we like to explain to people is that a standard suggested round of treatment is about 40 sessions plus periodic assessments to track
Mm-hmm.
how your brain. And if you think about it, yeah, that makes sense. It's going to take a while. It's going to take practice for your brain to be able to do what it needs to do to be better. Folks that have had traumatic brain injuries, we can have some positive impact on them as well. They may take longer because they've had some damage to tissue in there, so some of the workarounds may take longer to establish and maintain. I can't rebuild tissue that you've lost in your brain, but if your brain waves are out of balance
Mm-hmm.
because the tissue has been damaged, we can certainly help your brain to find workarounds, to find a better way to balance itself.
Sure. So you mentioned a few things, like sleep for yourself, sleep issues, ADHD. I think I did a little bit of research before this, and I think I saw that PTSD. What other type of mental disorders or mental issues could this be beneficial for? Or what type of client would typically come to you?
Yeah, PTSD and related to that, mood problems, anxiety, depression, memory issues, headaches, like migraine headaches.
Uh-huh.
There is a really cool process that we can do, and it can be possible to train away somebody's headache in the moment, if they're having a headache in that moment, in about 10 to 15 minutes. Because there's certain brain wave patterns that have gotten out of balance
Mm-hmm.
at that time, and if we tweak those a little bit, then that headache tends to go away. And then over time, if you come in for regular training, then you may have a lowered tendency to have migraine headaches. One effect that I noticed after I'd gone through I'd done about 36, 37 trainings total, and I usually get headaches when I fly. I don't know if it's the pressure of the cabin, or I think it may be, when I get a whiff of that jet engine fuel, it just, sets off a little allergic reaction, and just I get a migraine.
Sure.
So, so normally I will take a migraine pill to prepare for the ride on the airplane. I forgot to do that before I went off to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I landed, got to the hotel, and thought, now wait a minute. I almost always get a headache when I fly. I did not get a headache. So, and I have really not had that many migraines. I still get them occasionally, but not as many as I used to. Not nearly as many as I used to.
Wow.
So that's improved.
That is interesting.
Helps with chronic pain. Anything your brain can basically operate, which is almost everything,
Sure.
it can help with. So we try not to to overpromise for people.
Right.
It's like if you have a tendency to be grouchy, you might still have a tendency to be somewhat grouchy, but it's probably going to be better, if you do neurofeedback. If you're going to have bad days. Everybody has bad days. It doesn't make life. And it's really not that much hocus pocus when you start to think about it. It's like, it's like showing your brain its EEG and saying, okay, this over here, fix this. But, the squiggly lines on a screen don't really mean much, but, trying to watch a episode of a TV program on like Amazon Prime, and, in order to be able to see it, you gotta fix your brainwaves. It's like, okay, that I understand, being able to watch that episode of that program on the screen.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize the effects of all the prescription medications. Like, a lot of people are on countless medicines, so if you could get off one or two of them even by doing this, that's a benefit. Right.
Because they do have effects, other undesirable effects on the body. And so, if it's possible to get your brain to not need them any longer, then great. But when people come in, when they're on psychiatric medications, I don't prescribe. I don't give them advice about the medications. What I tell them is to try to notice the effects of the medication, notice how they change, when they change over time, because they probably will. And then to be prepared to talk to their medication provider about adjusting them as they go along. But I don't suggest to people, oh, hey, in order to do neurofeedback, go off your medication.
Right.
Because I don't really want a bunch of really miserable people running around out there until they're, the training really kicks in and it helps the brain function better.
Speaking of side effects or downsides, have there been or are there any side effects or downsides to doing this? I know it's non-invasive, but have there been any side effects or anything like that?
Depending on what spots in the brain that you train and how you train them. For example, if I tried to slow down your brain waves that are in your frontal lobes, which are right behind your forehead, if I tried to slow them down, you'd probably have difficulty focusing at work.
Okay.
It's a bad idea to slow them down.
Sure.
To slow them down too much. I mean, if they're just like, like a hamster in the hamster wheel who's just had too many espressos, then, maybe slow them down a bit. But most of the time we have to be really careful with that about, slowing down the frontal lobe, because generally they're not working fast enough to keep up with what we need them to do in terms of organizing our abilities. If I trained certain parts of the brain that are more responsible for emotional controls, if I overtrained those areas, in the wrong speed of brainwaves, then that individual might feel emotionally flat. Like, they just couldn't feel much of anything at all. I don't want to do that. So I depend on people's feedback to me about how is this making you feel,
Right.
Positives or negatives. We don't necessarily just jump to and immediately change the treatment plan just because they come in and say, well, last night just kind of made me a little irritable, and stick with it a bit. If we've got the sensors in the right spot and we're training the appropriate things, it might be that your brain is just used to a normal that is dysfunctional, and until it gets used to a better normal, it just might feel like, oh, this is weird. I don't like this. Well, okay, it's because it's normal and your brain hasn't been normal. So.
Sure. Speaking of, all of the various benefits of this, has this been used at all or has it been effective at all in battling like Alzheimer's?
I've seen some research out there. I'm not really that familiar with the ins and outs of it. And what Alzheimer's is a problem with those individual brain cells that have a lot of debris in them. So I can't do anything about that.
Right. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Now, there may be other effects from it. If you've got somebody who tends to be really, very, very irritable because of some of the effects from their Alzheimer's, then, we might be able to make a dent in that, but we have to be really cautious.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of ADD, ADHD, anxiety, kind of mood swings, and all these mental conditions, do you think there's been an increase in the past, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years compared to what it was? Or was it maybe more taboo to talk about, or has kind of technology and social media made that more abundant, or has it always been kind of the same?
I don't know that there's been necessarily any increase in ADHD, and we call anxiety and depression affective disorders, as in, feeling disorders. I don't know that there's been any increase in those conditions in the general population. I think that we are simply more sensitive to them now.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of maybe slight changes in how much people are, experiencing may be due to the fact that we live in a digital world, and I think we're very, very quick to compare ourselves to what we think is the normal and ordinary out there. Mm-hmm. And, if we don't look as good as we think we ought to because we don't look like somebody in a magazine, then
right.
we can start to down on ourselves. When in fact that person probably has a whole team of stylists,
right.
and airbrush
exactly.
results. So I think that we do tend to have kids on a lot of electronic devices, consuming media that in some way trains them to expect the world to be ever entertaining, and it's not. Sometimes there are some really dull things that you have to deal with in the day-to-day world. So
sure.
But back in the old days, before we had a lot of the modern medications to deal with depression and anxiety, there were a whole lot of miserable people walking around out there.
Right.
So I'm glad we have medications available and other tools available too, like neurofeedback.
Sure. That's really cool. I didn't know. I knew very briefly just from kind of a 5-minute Google search, but that was a really awesome description and explanation you gave, and I'm excited to let more people hear about that.
Yeah, great. It's one thing to keep in mind is that most providers who do neurofeedback don't take private health insurance for it, because health insurance would pay me about 10 to 20% of what I charge, which is not a sustainable business practice.
Sure.
But it's important for people to realize it's kind of like this is an investment in you being able to do better and be better. And it's not that, this is only going to be effective for as long as you're actively doing the neurofeedback. I finished up, like I said, it's almost going on 2 years ago. And the positive effects that I had from doing neurofeedback have remained. They've been stable. So I'm pleased with the effect that I had from it. So
sure.
It's
That's
been
awesome.
Really positive experience for me, which is why now I'm a provider.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you've been through it, so you know the benefits. You're not just pitching something you don't believe in, but you've felt the benefits firsthand.
Yeah, well, it's not something I just, took a class in or read about in a book and then, okay, yeah, it seems to help other people. It's like it's something I've experienced,
right.
So I know it's people to expect.
And people can find that at, is it riverparkpsych.com?
Right.
And I'll link that up in the show notes and everything.
Okay.
But I do just want to switch directions a little bit. I've got kind of a random question for you, and then I've got a few questions that I kind of ask everybody. But I'm not sure if you're familiar, but have you heard of the Neuralink? It's a company that Elon Musk is invested in kind of running.
Sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know for sure. What are they doing?
So the idea behind it, I think, is to kind of merge a human brain with artificial intelligence. And so I was just curious if you had heard of that, because it kind of seems like a kind of an offshoot of kind of what you work on, maybe a little more invasive, but I was just curious if you had heard of that.
Not much, no. And I think eventually we're going to be doing some of that. I think eventually we're going to have implantables that, help us out with various tasks.
Sure.
It's quite possible in those days, in the not so distant future when people are getting ready for those implantables, that then they may have to prepare their brains by doing something like neurofeedback to get the brain waves up to where they need to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So switch it up a little bit. What is something that you often recommend to people, whether that's a book or a podcast or a TV show or anything like that?
Oh wow. There's there's a book that I really like. It was not written by a psychologist. It's written by an average, ordinary guy who's had really a lot of very rich life experiences, and he now is a relationship expert. He's written a couple books. I have his second book like on pre-order through Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a newsletter that he puts out. I don't know if he has a podcast or not. He might. Um, but his name is, I'm going to get it wrong. I think his name is Mark Manson.
Okay. Yeah.
The name of the book is, and I'm going to say this so that it's, safe for work, kind of like because he's a bad word in the title. It's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Yeah, I've listened to that audiobook.
Yeah. And what I tell people is that, this guy's got a really cool, no-nonsense approach about, stop feeling so sorry for yourself. And that, most of the time when we're perfectionists or we're whining about some condition in our life, we're just being lazy and not really choosing to move forward. If you want to choose to move forward, there's going to be a little bit of discomfort in it. There's no getting around that.
I love it.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite failure in any aspect of your life?
Favorite failure. Yeah. My master's degree is actually in divinity. I went to seminary in Denver, and my intention was to be a pastoral counselor through the United Methodist Church. I realized close to the end of my program that I do not have a good temperamental fit with being a Methodist minister. And so I had to accept that and retool and decide to move forward. And I kind of got into a doctoral program almost by accident. I wanted to give it a go at trying at doing the application process and see how it went. Maybe apply for real in a couple of years. And because I really didn't have very high expectations for getting in, I think I was just very relaxed in the interview. And my peers rated me very highly in the group interview, and that's how I got in.
Very cool. That's interesting.
My GRE and my grades were nothing to write home about. I am not the smartest. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm just not.
That's all right. You're good at what you do.
I try.
What is your definition of success?
Success means continuing to move forward. That means that, if you don't get what you want, take a look at what you did get, and then, retool your efforts and decide to go for it again, or decide to, desire something different, but to not stop, not just, life. We're not designed to stop. We're designed to keep moving forward. Yeah,
I love that. Tell me about a life motto that you live by, or what is some of the best advice that you've received?
Life motto, I think, would be it's kind of like a only half formed one. It's like get up early and get the day started and do some stuff. Don't just figure that you're going to be happy by just laying around and just kicking back and not doing anything at all. That's not what makes you happy.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What is a habit that you've developed over the past few years that's most improved your life?
A habit that I've developed. Other than slowing down when I load the dishwasher, because my husband says that I absolutely do not know how to load a dishwasher, so I'm trying to be more mindful about how I load a dishwasher. I don't know if it counts as a habit or not, but for many, many years I've been working out regularly, and that's partly because I was born with a back condition that's meant that if I don't keep working at strengthening muscles and working on my coordination and all that, there's a chance that that could just degrade to the point that I would lose it. So, so it's important to me to, even though it hurts, to keep working out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, you're cutting out just a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
I moved the phone a little bit there. Is that better?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, okay.
So now I just have a couple more questions, and these are just kind of about Wichita. So
Sure.
having lived here for a little while, you probably have some good answers. What is your favorite part of Wichita, or what is a hidden gem that you would recommend to people?
Oh boy, my favorite part of Wichita is that we are a well-kept secret. It's like we're a pretty good sized city that other parts of the country discount, but it's like the cost of living here is really reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Enough sophistication for just about anybody, and it's kind of nice that the rest of the world thinks we're hicks because they're not like clamoring to get here. Like I said, I used to live in Colorado, and people clamor to get here, and everything's way too expensive there, and it's too many people. So
yeah, absolutely,
just right. And a hidden gem, there's a little French restaurant on Central called George's.
Oh yeah,
that's fabulous. The food's great and it looks pretty. It feels like you're in a sidewalk cafe in Paris.
Sure. My brother and his girlfriend, they got done traveling the world for a year, and she's actually from France, and so they went there and kind of had a big 3-course meal and everything, and they both said that's one of the best restaurants they've been to in any of the world. So
really, yeah, it's delightful. That's
one of our favorites.
There's a boutique that I admit that I am just a sucker for. It's called K Lanes. It's on the west side, and so I'm in there at least once a month because I'm a sucker for their loyalty program, and the staff there are excellent. And I love clothes, and my husband says I have too many of them, but I never have enough to wear, so how could I have too many?
That's how it goes sometimes. Is there anything that you wish Wichita had that it doesn't, or what would you improve about Wichita if you could?
If we were a better draw for performing arts, I think it's better with Interest Arena. But sometimes we tend to get passed over by, performing artists that might, could make it really, pleasant to be able to just drive downtown rather than having to go to another larger city.
Sure. Did you see, I'm not sure if you're a fan of, performing arts in general or just specific kinds, but did you see that we're getting Hamilton in the next year or two?
Yes.
That's pretty exciting.
And I have season tickets to Theater League, and so, it's like we were going to re-up anyway, my friend and I, but it was like, definitely, because, I wanted to see Hamilton ever since it was on, Broadway.
Sure.
And so, I'm really pumped for that.
So does that mean you fall on the side of the Century 2 debate to go ahead and tear it down and replace it, or would you rather them just build a new performing arts center somewhere else in Wichita?
I would like for them to repurpose Century 2.
Okay.
And build another one somewhere else. I think maybe it could fit as an aquarium. It's the right shape,
Right.
So, but I used to do theater in high school and college, and what I understand from the professionals is that the backstage part, the technical part, Century 2 is woefully lacking. And if you've gone to any kind of performances, Symphony Hall, then those cables that everybody trips on that you have to walk past to get into to get to the seats. It's kind of like it's just inadequate. I'm surprised that we got Lion King back, because what I heard is when they were last time they said that the laundry facilities next to costuming are just inadequate. So, and there's no really fixing that down there. So it was set up for an era that is past, and it's just not technically, it's not keeping up. Now the acoustics, in the Symphony Hall are wonderful, but technically, there are other areas that are inadequate.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just one more question. What does Wichita mean to you?
Wichita means home. Like I said, I lived away from here, and sometimes when people find out that I lived in Colorado for 8 years, they're like, oh, why would you come back here? It's like, why not? It's like, I could practice and have a good career, and be able to afford a home and a lifestyle that I want. And, it's like, it's great living here. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the weather's kind of dramatic, but at least we got seasons.
Yep, exactly. That's what we always say.
Yeah.
Awesome, Molly. This was a fun conversation. I really appreciate you sitting down. I will link up the River Park Psych. Is there anywhere else that people can find you, Facebook or LinkedIn or anything like that, or just go to the River Park website?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. And that's probably the best way to find me is through the River Park Psych website. And right now, we're not adding any new patients until the pandemic starts to pass. But
Sure.
But down there, we're always welcome to for people to contact us, and we have a variety of therapists here on staff to meet most people's needs.
Awesome, perfect. Thanks again, Molly, and stay safe through everything, and have a good one.
Thank you. Good luck, Landon.
Bye.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thank you again to everyone that listened to this episode of the Wichita Life Podcast. If you enjoyed, please rate and review our podcast on whatever app you use. If you have any recommendations, please reach out at wichitalifeict@gmail.com. Thanks again.